Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition of TGC Radio. This is episode 4. This is episode 4 where we'll be taking a look at my week-to-week listening from December 15th to December 21st, 2023. And after that is done, last week I went through my personal favorite songs of 2023 that I listened to, not necessarily that came out in 2023. Same rule set applies. But instead of songs, we'll be looking at my favorite artists from 2023, but not necessarily artists that put out material this year. But with that being said, let's get into the normal week-to-week stuff for December 15th to December 21st. We'll start off with artists like we always do. My most listened to artist was The Killers at number 1. Then we have Against the Current, We Are the In Crowd. Tied at number 4, Blink-182 and Spanish Love Songs. And then at number 6, we have a 4-way tie. We have All Time Low, Concrete Castles, Honey Revenge, and Story of the Year. That's all kind of par for the course, really, for me, to be honest, at this point. I was genuinely surprised All Time Low got in there. Like I've said before, like, ever since, like, the allegations and controversy with them kind of came out, you know, like, they were my favorite band at one point, and I do still genuinely like a lot of their music, but I've been trying to get myself to, like, listen to them significantly less, to the point where, like, I'm not listening to them at all. Which I guess technically I wouldn't really have to do that thinking about it, because I own, like, every record they have physically, with the exception of the newest one. So if I ever wanted to listen to some of their greatest hits, I could just put a CD or vinyl on. And if I still wanted it scrabbled, I could scrabble it manually. Things to think about. I don't know. But yeah, I'm surprised they got on there because I didn't really listen to them that much. But apparently I listened to them the same amount as Concrete Castle's Honey Revenge and Story of the Year. But that's the only thing that I find a little bit weird on this one. But I don't really have much else to say really on that one. So we'll move on to albums. My most listened to album of the week was Sam's Town by The Killers, In Our Bones by Against the Current, Retrovision by Honey Revenge, and Page Avenue 10 Years and Counting by Story of the Year. That's all number 2, tied for that spot. And then down at number 5, we have Tell Me I'm Alive by All Time Low, One More Time by Blink-182, Boxcar Racer by Boxcar Racer, Brand New Me by Concrete Castles, Smile and Wave by Saint, and No Joy by Spanish Love Songs. And now, some of this listening and the way it's in here is specifically because I put a playlist together to prepare for next week's second part of TGC Radio, where I'll be talking about my favorite albums that I listened to within this year. So I was listening to that, trying to figure out the order there, listening to that playlist, and my favorites from each album that I put in there. So that was kind of the thing with that, and that's where most of the stuff comes from for this week. Genuinely, though, Sam's Town, I started listening to some of those songs again because of that. In Our Bones, I've been keeping it in rotation quite a bit since I finally went back to re-listen to it, I think a couple months ago. Retrovision, I've talked about before. I think Honey Revenge is just, I think Honey Revenge is a cool, two-piece band that has a bright future. Again, I've talked about Page Avenue 10 Years and Counting enough at this point. We'll move on. Very good re-record of Page Avenue, though. That's where I'll end that. Again, kind of like what I was talking about All Time Low, I don't really know how they made the list, but don't know how Tell Me I'm Alive really made the list. One More Time, I've been keeping in rotation since it came out in October. Boxcar Racer, ever since I finally sat down to listen to the entire thing, I've loved it and kept it in rotation. Brand New Me, I jumped back into that kind of for the same kind of reason I talked about Sam's Town. Smile and Wave, same thing. No Joy, I just wanted to listen to No Joy because I've put enough time into Brave Faces that I really want to do the same for No Joy, and I've been trying to do that, listening to it more and more. Because, like, I like it. I know I like it. It's an album that is just like crying on the dance floor is the best way to describe it in my head. And I love that. But aside from that, I don't quite know how I feel about it entirely. But that was the albums. And there are really only 2 songs to talk about for this week. One more than the last couple of weeks for the week-to-week stuff with the series. And that is, once again, Page Avenue 10-year version by Story of the Year and Bones by The Killers from their album Sam's Town. I love both those songs a lot. Obviously, Page Avenue was on here last week. And Bones, I think, is a very solid, very theatrical track from Sam's Town. And I love the theatrics of that record in general. And that's part of why I love that record. It's my favorite Killers record. Even if Hot Fuss, admittedly, when I finally sat down to listen to all of Hot Fuss this year, I wasn't necessarily won over by it, to be completely honest. The songs that I knew I liked already, I still liked and thought were really good. Obviously, Bright Side's iconic. Somebody Told Me is iconic. And I liked, Midnight Show, the second part of the Murder Trilogy. I liked Glamorous Indie Rock and Roll. And I thought some of the tracks were fine, but it just didn't win me over. And having started with Sam's Town and then jumping back to Hot Fuzz, I think that's what did it. Because genuinely, I just prefer Sam's Town as a record. But Hot Fuzz, the more time I've given it this year, it's definitely won me over more, for sure. On the way home today, Sirius XM started playing, I don't remember what station, but one of the stations on there started playing Jenny Was a Friend of Mine, and I immediately turned it up. It's hell yeah. So yeah, little rant tangent, I guess, little tangent there, because what would I be without going on some random tangent? But yeah, no, that is really all I got to talk about. Artists, albums, and songs, week to week, most listened to stuff. You get the idea. You get what I'm saying. You understand it by this point if you're watching this. Unless this is your first episode, and I don't know why you started with episode 4, but hey, welcome. Hello. Also, please go back and watch the first 3. They were a lot of fun to put out. I guess technically first 4 episodes, because the very first one I made for this was a pilot episode. But yeah, anyway, check those out. But also finish this one first. But nonetheless, yeah, whatever. You get the idea. That is all the week-to-week stuff. I'm rambling at this point. But there is another part of the episode which I alluded to at the beginning. And that is, we'll be taking a look at my favorite artists that I listened to within 2023. But not necessarily artists that released material in 2023. Keep that in mind. That really is the only ground rule, and there's no way for me to break the ground rule of 1 entry per artist, because, well, this is all about artists anyway. So, there's no way for me to break that rule like it did in the last one. But with that being said, I do have a few honorable mentions for artists. We will be doing a top 12, because again, my thing is top 6s, and I want to do more than 6. But we have 4 honorable mentions, and that those bands are Honey Revenge, Story of the Year, Alex Melton, and Alex Goot. And I just listen to their music a lot. In the case of Alex Melton and Alex Goot, it's mainly their covers that I listen to a lot throughout the year, but they've, with Alex Goot being particularly Alex Goot and Friends Volume 3, that covers record, which I still love a lot. It's always in constant rotation for me. I think it is absolute top tier for a covers record. And Alex Melton, I mean, not particularly any one EP or record from him with the covers, but I mean, I've just listened to a lot of his covers throughout the year. Pretty much any of the If Blink Wrote Blanks format series, I love that a lot. Almost every one is just great, and he knows Blink, maybe even better than Blink knows Blink, if that makes any sense. Those are all great. I will admit some of them do lean a bit more on pop punk version of said thing, but for the most part he nails it, and they're all great. His other covers are great too. Like, I still love his 11-band pop-punk mashup of MGK's I Think I'm Okay. I don't particularly like that song anyway. I mean, I think the original's fine, but I don't care for it that much. But I think what Alex did with that, doing 11 small styles of different pop-punk bands for that, was just all executed flawlessly. And I would love to see him do like a full style of that, which I know he hinted at before at the end of that video. But yeah, I'd like to see him do one of those in full. Personally, I would love to see him do the Taking Back Sunday one in full, personally. I love that style a lot. But I mean, any of them would be great. I'm actually thinking about it now. I'm actually surprised he hasn't done If Blink wrote I Think I'm Okay. That, either that or Angels and Airwaves, either would fit. But anyway, that's not the point. But yeah, Alex Q, Alex Mountain, I think both, particularly for the covers in this case, should get their honorable mention there. Also, Alex Mountain obviously signed to Pure Noise Records now. He does have his debut record, which is a covers record, admittedly, but it is half pop-punk covers of country songs and half country versions of pop-punk songs. So if any of that interests you, check that out. Story of the Year, I've talked about quite a bit recently. I've always kind of like known about Story of the Year and liked them, but even if like the main song I only ever came back to originally was their song was Until the Day I Die. But I mean, that is a good song. I like Page Avenue. Eventually, I will sit down with the actual Page Avenue in full. I don't know when I'll do that, but that will happen eventually. But yeah, no, I love the re-recording of Page Avenue, like I've talked about so many times. And I don't think they quite make my favorite artist of 2023, but they absolutely have to get a shout out. And then Honey Revenge, I've talked about, again, quite a bit at this point as well. Again, I think they're just a really cool two-piece band that has such a bright future ahead of them, and I can't wait to see what they do more, because if their first record, Retrovision, I thought was personally very good, you know, I want to see what they do after that. But those are my honorable mentions, so let's get into the top 12. Coming in at number 12, we have Saint Asonia. Now, admittedly, Saint Asonia, obviously, they're a band that I followed since they debuted. You know, being a big 3 Days Grace fan, getting into, or re-getting into 3 Days Grace, if you will, being reintroduced to the band, around the time that Adam had left and they brought Matt in, I was like, okay, so I originally listened to Human. I didn't dislike it. I thought some stuff was good. I don't particularly care for the record now, and I do think it's not their weakest, but it is a fairly weak record, I would say. But even despite that, you know, I was very interested in anything that, you know, anyone was... I was really interested in projects coming out of that split, right? So again, I was very interested in what 3 Days Grace was doing with Matt vocally, and then I was interested with Saint Asonia, what I learned about them. And the fact that they started out as this kind of like super group, which they're not quite anymore. But yeah, they started out this kind of super group, being led by Adam and, you know, Adam Gonche, which I just learned his last name is pronounced closer to Gonche instead of Gontier, which I've always said. Which threw me for a loop, but that's a different conversation. Also, but him leading the way along with the lead guitarist of Stained, Mike, I thought, yeah, okay, very interested, even if I didn't care for Stained at all, like, ever at any point. Very interested still. And, again, I liked their self-titled record a lot when it first came out. And then I grew to the point where I didn't care for it. And now I'm at a point now where I like the record, but I hate the singles for that record. Again, I think Better Place is okay. Blow Me Wide Open, I think, is the best pre-release single for that record. And then Let Me Live My Life, no. Weakest song on that record. It's nothing but edge. Keep it away from me. But no, if you remove the singles out of the equation, like I've said before, I won't go too in-depth there. I think the first Saint Anesthesia record is fine. Is totally fine. With some genuinely good tracks. I think Flawed Design, I've talked about before, is the best writing Adam's ever done for a record. It's an incredibly solid record overall. And then I do like Introvert and Extrovert, the 2 EPs that came out 2022. I think those are both solid as well. I don't think the writing is quite as strong as Flawed Design, and I do think instrumentally some of them feel a bit kind of like Adam-style cookie cutter in a way. Like, they're all still good if you like that style, and you know, like, what Adam has done throughout his entire musical career. Like, if you like that, totally cool, and you'll like this. I like a lot of that too. But again, I think musically, instrumentally, Flawed Design is more interesting. But Extrovert and Introvert are still very good. I still would put them above the self-titled even. With my, like, kind of newfound respect for that record. So yeah. But again, I talked about it with one of their songs in the most listened to songs video as well from last week. Or my favorite songs of 2023 from last week. I just don't really listen to stuff like that much anymore, so that I do feel like Saint Anesthesia has to be at the bottom of the list, all things considered. But yeah, so there's Saint Anesthesia at number 12. In at number 11, we have Concrete Castles, and I've talked about them before as well. Again, I followed them since they were, you know, only the cover band First to 11, you know? Where occasionally when they would release their own original music, it was still under the First to 11 banner. And I like a lot of what they've done as First to 11. And I still come back to some of those covers too. And I think some of them are still good. Like recently I re-listened to the cover of Face Down, and I think that still just might be one of Audra's best vocal performances on that cover. I love that cover so much. Like they just nailed that. They just nailed that out of the park. It was so good. And then, yeah, I was very excited for Concrete Castles, knowing they have a record label behind them as well. It was all just looking very good for them. I was like, hell yeah, this is great. They're a very young band with a bunch of talent and potential, and with, even if it might be a smaller label, I don't know for sure, I haven't done the research on that, but even if it might be a smaller label, like, there's still a label behind them, you know? And that is huge. And, like, really, like, sky's the limit for them, you know? And again, Wish I Missed You, I thought was a good debut record that has since grown on me even more as I have revisited it since. And Brand New Me, I don't think it's quite as strong as an overall package as Wish I Missed You, but I think the highest highs, the best songs on Brand New Me are easily better than the best songs on Wish I Missed You as well. But yeah, that's how I feel about Brand New Me and Wish I Missed You. And Concrete Castles, admittedly, I haven't come back to them quite as much as I would like throughout the year, but given their smaller discography as an originals project, I've come back to them quite a bit, and I think they absolutely deserve to be on any sort of best of list. They've got so much potential and they're so good. But coming in at number 10, we have Paramore. Paramore I think I've talked about a lot, but in other videos, not for TGC Radio at all. But I love Paramore. They used to be like one of my favorite bands ever. They're still one of my favorite bands ever. I love them so much, and I love seeing their, you know, like, raw, punky, kind of emo-tinged beginnings with All We Know Is Falling, becoming a bit more polished on Riot, And then they started getting a bit poppier with each release after that. To an extent, of course. And then they put out like a pure like 80s synth pop record after Laughter, which I love so much. And then they came back after, quite a long time between records there and put out a post-punk record, which is really good. And is also, again, a different style that they hadn't really done before, and they did it really well. I don't think they did it perfectly, and I don't love This Is Why, but I still like it a lot. And again, the songs on here that are really good are so good. Like, again, even though I think personally the best single on This Is Why is The News, and I still love that a lot, it's in constant rotation for me throughout the entire year. But the rest of like the first half of the record, I don't particularly care for. But once we get into the back half of that record, it is so good, and there's not a skippable track. And then since then, I've only heard very good things about the re-recording of This Is Why, which also introduced an extra track, which was like some sort of bonus demo track, which again, as I've heard very good things about. So yeah, and admittedly, I would have liked to put Paramore higher on the list because of how much they mean to me personally. But if I look at how much I listen to them throughout the year, I don't think they can be much higher than this. Maybe if I liked This Is Why just a little bit more, maybe. But for right now, they're still on my favorite artists of 2023. And I think that does mean a lot, at least to me. No one else would care, but it means a lot to me. So they do have to be here. But then at number 9, we have You Me at 6. And this is a band where, again, I've known about them for a while. But I never really dug into their discography personally. So this year I was like, okay, again, I know of the band. I've liked things that Josh has featured on. So let's check them out. And weirdly, I actually started out from the beginning and listened to their first record, Take Off Your Colors. And I was like, wow, this is actually a really good pop punk record. Like, it's really good. Especially for a pop punk debut. And then I didn't come back to it as much as I would have liked to because I ended up listening to the, like, US version of the record, which is also, like, the bonus track version of the record, which has 20 songs. So, yeah. So that was one where I definitely should have... that was one where I definitely should have done more research on that record specifically for my albums project earlier in the year. Or throughout the year. Because, yeah, no... had I known the original way they wanted you to experience Take Off Your Colors was a 13-track record, I would have been like, absolutely that, not a 20-track record. Now, admittedly, the 20-track record, as a 20-track record, it is still a good record, but it makes it so much more difficult to come back to. So much more difficult to come back to. But in general, yeah, yeah. I like the record a lot. Thought it was very good. And there were songs that, at least at the start of the year, that I came back to all the time. And at the start of the year, I was kind of obsessed with You Me at 6. And I'm also not upset in any way that I did listen to the bonus track version of the record, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have listened to the bonus track version's closing track, Kiss and Tell, and that is genuinely one of my favorite tracks on that record. So, yeah. I'm happy about that. Actually, I probably would have, because I'd already listened to Kiss and Tell before listening to the record, thinking about it. So, ignore what I just said. Never mind. But yeah, You Me at 6, I was kind of obsessed with them at the start of the year, and I think they just barely beat out Paramore on my list for my favorite artist. But I don't think they can be higher than number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have Gin Blossoms. And honestly, kind of similar to Yumi at 6, right at the end of 2022, in the start of 2023, I was just kind of obsessed with Gin Blossoms and learning more about the band and what they had gone through. And while I haven't actually sat down and listened to an entire record from them, I did sit down with their compilation record, Outside Looking In, and all the tracks that were picked for that I thought were good, and I thought there were some standouts aside from their biggest hits, like Till I Hear It From You, Found Out About You, Hey Jealousy, Follow You Down, etc. And just because of how much I listened to them at the start of the year, and the fact that I was genuinely kind of obsessed with the band at the start of the year, again, I feel like they have to be just above Yumi at 6. Coming in at number 7, we have Fall Out Boy. Again, similar reason to Gin Blossoms and Yumi at 6. Particularly at the start of the year, I was kind of obsessed with Fall Out Boy. Like, when they dropped Love From the Other Side at the start of the year, like, obviously I already knew about Fall Out Boy. I already liked Fall Out Boy a lot. And when they dropped Love From the Other Side, I was instantly hooked on that song. Incredibly hyped up for the announcement of So Much for Stardust. Sat down with that record, and that actually became the first Fall Out Boy record that I sat down with and properly listened to when it came out. It's like, okay, cool. Again, not a perfect record, but I still think it's a solid record overall, and there's a lot of good stuff on that record. And yeah, the only thing that puts Fall Out Boy in my head, or on this list, above Gin Blossoms and Yumi at 6 in here, is Fall Out Boy. I listen to more of their catalog constantly throughout the year, instead of just kind of like being obsessed with them at the start of the year like the previous two. Like, my listening of Fall Out Boy, like I said, lasted throughout the entire year, and it went through more of their discography. But then we have at number 6, Blink-182. Right before the top 5, we have Blink-182, and again, similar to Fall Out Boy, you know, I've known about Blink for a long time, love Blink, and I was already listening to quite a bit of their stuff throughout the year. And like, at the time the year started, they had only put out Edging for what would go on to be One More Time. And Edging is a fine song. I'll always stand by. It's a fine song. It's a very safe pick for first single with Tom back in the band. And they just wanted to write a song that showed, hey, can we still write together? And the answer was yes. But at the same time, I don't think it's all that great. And though, admittedly, it's not my least favorite on One More Time, I do think it is a fairly weak track amongst the rest of them on the record. But it's still a good song. And then that, along with some of their biggest hits, some deep cuts mixed in, I just was listening to Blink, kind of like Fall Out Boy, constantly throughout the year. And then I listened to One More Time right when it came out, mainly because it came out on my birthday. So I was like, okay, cool. That's basically a birthday present to me. And I love it. And I enjoyed the record a lot. Generally, I did. I still like it. I still come back to songs from that record, like, all the time. And then I listened to that, and then I finally started digging through and listening to Boxcar Racer in full, When Your Heart Stops Beating in full. I'd already listened to the first 2 Angels and Airwaves records in full. I finally sat down and listened to the Matt Skiba records in full, 9 in California. And genuinely, I like those records a lot. I love all those records, actually. And again, it was both a combination of Bored to Death as a song and One More Time as an album that really gave me the kick in the ass I needed to fully just jump straight in and listen to Blink's entire discography, and also listening to kind of like what I've titled the Blink and Friends section of this video. As I also listened to the, as far as I know, one and only Tom solo record as well. To the Stars, Demos, Odds and Ends, and I think it's good too. So of course, I learned to love Blink even more than I already did because of all of that. and they are right before the top 5. So my 5 favorite artists of 2023, number 5, we have We Are the In Crowd. And, you know, for a band that I didn't personally start listening to until 2021, the end of 2021, I would say the fact that they're genuinely one of my favorite bands is absolutely insane. But, like, I love their lyrical style, and the fact that they write a style of pop punk that I just personally love. It hits me in a way that very few things have. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I personally just love, like, neon pop punk. I think that's why I ended up falling in love with All Time Low as a band for a while. Why I really like Hey Monday and Forever the Sickest Kids. And while I don't necessarily know if I would consider We Are the In Crowd fully neon pop punk, there's definitely some of that in there. And again, guaranteed to disagree. Best Intentions, Weird Kids, all fantastic. I love them so much. And genuinely, I also want to take this time to mention Tay's solo project, Saint. I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced. But yeah, I also want to mention Tay's solo project as well, because I listened to her EP Bad Summer and her, I think, first solo record, Smile and Wave, and I liked both. I prefer Smile and Wave because it appeals to me more personally. Like, Bad Summer is definitely more of just like a pop EP, and it's still good. Like, I still loved listening to it. Don't get that twisted. But again, I prefer Smile and Wave personally. But I think I'm also biased because by that point I already knew I loved We Are the In Crowd, and some of those tracks on Smile and Wave, they feel like In Crowd tracks. They really do. And I'm not mad at it. And I'll talk about that more in the video I will make for all the albums I listened to in the year in full. I'll talk about that in that video eventually. But yeah, I love We Are the In Crowd. And I do think it's absolutely hilarious, like I said, that a band that I didn't personally listen to at all, not one track, until late 2021, has easily made my top 5 artists. But generally, yeah, I love them, and absolutely, I think they absolutely deserve there for how much they mean to me now. But coming in at number 4, we have The Killers, and I mean, The Killers has to be here, you know. One of my most listened to artists overall throughout the entire year. I've dug through almost their entire discography, with the exception of their most recent studio release, Pressure Machine. And yeah, I love The Killers. I love their sound. I love just what they go for musically. It all hits just right for me. And yeah, I don't know much else to say. You know, I've already talked about my experience with Hot Fuss in this video and how I didn't necessarily care for it as a record when I first sat down and listened to it, but now it's grown on me a lot more. I love Sam's Town. Day and Age, I think I like Day and Age. I don't know if I ever want to come back to it in full, but again, the songs that are really good on there are so good, and like, I still come back to stuff on there all the time, like Dustland Fairy Tale, Spaceman, Neon Tiger I love a lot as well. And there's some more tracks as well, but those are the kind of the top 3 for me. But yeah, sadly, Battleborn and Wonderful Wonderful didn't quite win me over at first. Wonderful Wonderful, I think I just need to sit down and listen to it again. And Battleborn, I don't know. I really wanted to like Battleborn, and there's songs I do like. And I don't know if I just need to listen to it again and fully pay attention to it, I don't know if maybe I was just in like a bad headspace, bad place mentally when listening to it. I don't know. But Battleborn just didn't do it for me and hasn't really won me over that much. Wonderful, Wonderful, I for sure need to just listen to again, like, and focus on it entirely. But yeah, and then Imploding the Mirage, having listened to it rather recently, I really like that record. Again, I still think Caution is like easily the best song on the record. But like, when you have a song as strong as Caution, what can you say? And eventually I will end up listening to Pressure Machine. Like, that's definitely on the must-listen list for me. But that's The Killers. And coming in at number 3, we have Echosmith. And again, I never pictured myself genuinely loving Echosmith so much that I would want them to be considered my 3rd favorite artist within a year. And like, generally, again, of all time, they're definitely up there for me now as well. Like, I never would have imagined that, because like I've said, I think in the previous video, if you would have asked me like more than a few years ago, but if you would have asked me like years ago, I probably wouldn't have even been able to tell you who Echosmith was. Because like, literally all that I knew from them at that time would have been Cool Kids. And I didn't know like who the band was. But listening to Talking Dreams, falling in love with that record, and it's my most listened to record throughout the entire year. I love that record a lot. And knowing just how much good material I personally think is on that record. Like, I do wish, like, Cool Kids is still a good song, I think. But, I don't know, I just kind of wish more people would give some of the other tracks on the record a shot. I guess aside from Bright, because Bright is a really popular song too. But you know, I think some of the deep cuts on that record are really good. But then also, re-listening to Lonely Generation and like appreciating that record so much more, listening to the singles released for Self-Titled, and then genuinely liking that record a lot. Again, the Self-Titled is another one that I both want and need to sit down with more. But yeah, from what I've listened to of it, I listened to the entire thing, and from what I've listened to of it, I still like it a lot, you know? And genuinely, with how much I've just loved Echosmith throughout the entire year, they definitely deserve to be top 3. But at number 2, this one may surprise you if you're familiar with me and have watched the previous episodes. But coming in at number 2, we have Spanish Love Songs. Now, this one and 2 was a bit of a toss-up for me, and it could probably change at any given moment. But I've decided on number 2, Spanish Love Songs, because even though I've come back to Brave Faces, Everyone, in full so many times throughout the record, even though I love No Joy, even though from what I've listened to of Schmaltz, I love Schmaltz. I love Doom and Gloom Sessions. Like, I just love this band, and that's all I can say really, is I love this band. And Brave Faces, again, I think the fact that Brave Faces is one of very few records for me that I would consider to be a perfect record. Like a 10 out of 10. And I think that says enough, quite honestly. But again, No Joy, kind of like what I said with Self-Titled, Echosmith, and like Wonderful Wonderful. It's a record I want to sit down with more. Like, I've listened to it in full, but I both want and need to sit down with it more. I love it a lot. Again, I don't think it's quite as strong personally as Brave Faces, But it's also not Brave Faces. They're not trying to do the same thing. Like, Brave Faces is a loud, angry, sad record that sounds all of those things. You know? And, like, it is an emo record through and through. No Joy, again, No Joy, I think, lyrically is even more depressing. But also, it's like crying on the dance floor. You know? I stand by that. I think that is the best way to describe No Joy. And, like, songs like Haunted and Cleanup Crew and Pendulum and Lifers, the opener of the record, and so many more, I think just illustrates that point in full. And they all stand out. They're all so good. And again, even if personally I would much rather come back to Brave Faces as a record, No Joy is still so good. And again, the fact that, like, I guess for me as well, anytime that I started having, like, anytime that I just got, like, sad or depressed or pissed off from, like, work or anything like that, anytime I got that way throughout the year, you know, Spanish love songs, I always would put something of theirs on, primarily Brave Faces, and it's just like, you know, listening to that all the time, and listening, like, just throwing that on as, like, I'm walking home, and it's like, okay, just hearing those songs, hearing the way they're playing, hearing Dylan's voice as he's singing all these tracks, like, yes. Like, it didn't make me happy, but it definitely helped me get through what I was going through in those moments. And I think that's why I kept coming back to the band and Brave Faces as an album specifically so much. But alternatively, there is a band that I did that same kind of thing, and even when I was very sad, depressed, angry or whatever, any kind of mood I was in, I would put on this band at number one. And a lot of their music did genuinely make me happy and made me forget about my problems, at least for a short time. And that band is, number one, Against the Current. Again, a band that kind of like with Echo Smith, I had heard of Against the Current, right? When I first really got into them, but I hadn't really ever listened to their stuff. I had no idea that, you know, they were doing covers on YouTube and working with different covers in quotes, artists, you know? Like, I had no idea. Like, my first exposure to Against the Current was the stuff on Fever, you know? And I love that EP, half of a record, whatever you want to call it, a lot, you know? I do. I originally wanted to describe it as, like, their strongest material, and I don't quite know if I fully agree with that. Because to imply that it's their strongest material, I would at least you would think then that that would be the material I came back to the most and I listened to the most throughout the year. Which just isn't true. Like, I love Fever, and I do think there's tracks on there that are some of the strongest material ever. And I think it was so admirable that they went intentionally for a sound on that record in the studio that they then wouldn't have to adjust the songs to play them live, like they said they did for In Our Bones and Past Lives. They wanted to write songs for Fever that sounded the same in the studio as they would playing them live. And again, I think that's so admirable, and I think they nailed it as well. And again, I love, like, that entire EP. But it is kind of crazy to think that, you know, I didn't really get into them until, like, I think 2021, around that time. And again, like, they're my most listened to band. They're like one of, if not my favorite bands ever at this point. And I love, like, their entire discography. I come back to, like, everything all the time. And while Echosmith might have my most listened to record of the year, I guess The Current is easily my most listened to band of the year. You know? Like, their entire discography I love so much. They mean the world to me, and I think, again, like I was talking about Spanish love songs, and I was alluding to in the transition to number one, I think it says quite a bit, you know, that Spanish love songs, again, like, I might have been, like, super depressed or whatever, and then listening to stuff like Brave Faces, it didn't make me happy, but it helped me get through whatever it was that I needed to get through. But Against the Current, I talked about this before with my favorite tracks episode of this last episode, with Friendly Reminder specifically, but yeah, listening to stuff like all of Past Lives, to be honest, and keeping that in constant rotation throughout the year, the entire year, like, when anything from Against the Current came on, again, it just, like, made me happy. It, at least temporarily, got me out of, like, whatever mood I was in. And I think that says the world, that speaks volumes, and again, they're truly, like, probably my favorite artist ever at this point, you know? And yeah. But I think that is all that... I think that's all that I have for you today. I went through my week-to-week stuff, my most listened to stuff from the week of December 15th to December 21st. And I gave you my top 12 artists that I listened to throughout 2023, with a few honorable mentions as well. And yeah, I feel really good about that. I feel really good about that list. I feel like it represents me really well, at least me throughout the year, and can't wait to see who I listen to and what I listen to next year. But stay tuned to TGC Radio for episode 5, because that not only will be the week-to-week stuff, is once again, like always, but that will be my favorite albums that I listened to in 2023. But this was the week-to-week stuff with my favorite artists of 2023. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, comment down below, share it on social media, do all that good stuff. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye, guys.